start here. I thought so, but I have not seen. So, some did, but no, not what I mean, I think they just kind of did that on their own, along with their house, that kind of deal. What is this? It is kind of a fortress, but it would be a great one because it's made out of like cloth. But it is the tabernacle, which just means tent, right? It's kind of the idea. Just a kind of maybe a fancier tent. There's probably some real good word for it. But this is the tabernacle as the Israelites had. The Israelites had the tabernacle. When were they given that? Do you know? Well, like, let's say where. Let's go where. Where were they given the law? So Moses went up to a mountain, Mount Sinai, right? So he goes up to the mountain, and then he comes down, and he has the Ten Commandments, and he also has something else with him. Instructions on how to build this, and a whole, another list of laws. But he came down with instructions for how to build the tabernacle, and we can read about that in Exodus. But the focus tonight is something that I've been teaching all day today at FFA, but I think it's helpful. So, have y'all ever felt like you feel out of place at times? Yeah, I raised my hand. We can all raise our hands on that one. It's going to happen from time to time, maybe more so when you're younger, but at the same time, it's not guaranteed to always be the case, and it's not guaranteed to not be the case when you're older. You can feel out of place in many different ways, right? So when you go home, like when you go home this evening, isn't that usually a good place to be? Right, usually. I mean, yes, you can get in trouble at home, so that's no fun, but, they're doing the right thing because they're trying to teach you right. So, all right, but either way, it doesn't make you feel good when you're in trouble. That's okay. It's not supposed to. But when you're not home, you're often longing to be home, right? You're like, I miss my dad, I miss, my family, perhaps, if you're away from them at camp or something, or whatever it might be. Or maybe you think about home in another way. Maybe home, it feels like a place that's safe, maybe around friends or a church family, perhaps. So, it feels like safety and peace. So when you're away from that, you feel like a pilgrim. You feel like a sojourner. Have you heard of sojourner truth? You might not have yet, but in history class, as you get older, you will probably learn about this lady. She changed her name to Sojourner Truth. Doesn't that sound like a fun name? Yeah. Not really. Sojourner's kind of tough, but it just means pilgrim, right? You've heard of the pilgrim. So pilgrim is, somebody who lives in a land that's not theirs. So they made a trek, a travel from one place to another. And sojourner is kind of like a nomad. Maybe you've heard that one too, right? Somebody who you're traveling and you live in your tent, but you aren't living at home. That's like that. Your tent is your home. You don't really have a homeland. Make sense? So what I want to do tonight is teach you a little bit about the fact that sometimes that is a good thing, to feel out of place in this world. For example, so go to 1 Peter. I know we've been in the book of James, but honestly, 1 Peter and James have some pretty similar ideas as they were written to early church members. It's right after James, 1 Peter, chapter 2. First Peter, right after James. All right, so First Peter, look at chapter 2, verse 11. Somebody read it.
Do remember that earth you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from the desires which were declared for.
All right, so yours said strangers, foreigners, and exiles. Okay, so New King James says sojourners, sojourner, and pilgrims. So, but foreigner and exile is a similar idea. You're exiled to a place that's not your home. You're a foreign person because that means you are not in your homeland. So you have sojourners and pilgrims, which this word sojourner is par oikos. So par, wow, something is messed up here. All right, par oikos. And oikos just means house. And so par is short for para, and it means beside the house. You know, you don't have a house; you're outside the house. Kind of the idea. So sojourners is what is this word in the Greek. This is Greek words, and then the word for pilgrim there in 1 Peter 2 is para, or no, not para. I think there's par epidemos. It's par epidemos. I've taught this like 4 times today and 4 times yesterday. So, par epidemos, and demos means a group of people or an assembly of people. So you think about being a pilgrim is this idea of you're being outside the assembly of people. You don't feel like you're part of the group. You're outside the group. That's kind of the idea. And so in the Old Testament, God's people, what were they called? Israelites. Okay, so Israelites, how would we describe Israelites in a way? Or where did they come from? Who did they come from? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Okay, Jacob was, his name was Jacob, right? And then it changed to Israel. Jacob means supplanter, deceiver. He didn't really start out on the right foot. That's a funny thing. So he was against God for a while. Then he wrestled with God one night, with an angel from God. You know, there's a whole deal about that. But then God changes his name to Israel. So then all of his sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. And so what happens is they are given the land, right? As we call it, or as they call it, the promised land. And that becomes, the land of Israel as we even know it today. So the land of Israel is their land. There's a famine, which means what? What is a famine? No food, right? Or there's no rain, so there's no crops to grow food, and so either way, there's no food in some way. So they go to Egypt. They go down to Egypt, and God is providing for them. They become this great nation in number, and the Egyptians say, "Hey, we don't like that because you have more people than we do. So all you have to do, if you disagree with us, is just take us over, right? You have more." And so that was their thought. So they enslaved the Israelites, right? The Egyptians said, "Let's just enslave them. That way they won't overtake us." Well, now at that point, are they away from home? Yes, right. They're away. They're gone. Their homeland was the promised land. They've gone all the way down to Egypt to find food, and God did that for them and helped them. But they're now in a strange land. They're now strangers, foreigners, pilgrims, sojourners, right? That's the idea. They're in a land that's not their own, but God is still with them. And so sometimes in the Old Testament, you have God's people finding themselves as pilgrims, as sojourners, as nomads in a moment. But they still kind of have a new home in a sense, right? Egypt is going to become their home. And so for 400 years, many generations, you have the Israelites are there in Egypt, and once they're oppressed by the Egyptians, they cry out to God, right? That's the only thing to do when you are hurting and oppressed by anyone. You cry out to God, and He heard them, and He delivers them through the 10 what? The 10 plagues. And then we get the Ten Commandments in a moment, right? At Mount Sinai, as we talked about just a moment ago. So we're kind of getting all the way back to the tabernacle idea in a moment. But sojourners, pilgrims, they come out of Egypt, right? They go through the Red Sea. And then from there, are they, their home was kind of in Egypt at that point, right? These new generations, their home was Egypt. And they cross the Red Sea. Are they home now? No, they're not back in the promised land yet, right? They go through the wilderness. And so now they become these sojourners and pilgrims, these nomads. That they have this great group of people with a great name and, the great God, but they don't have a land, right? Or they have a land, but they have to go to it. And so for a moment, they are going there. All right, so basically, I say all that to say that, like in the Old Testament, they went up to Mount Sinai and they received these instructions. So after they cross the Red Sea, they're in the wilderness. Moses goes up, gets the Ten Commandments, gets the instructions on how to build the tabernacle. Does this look like a building that is permanent? Like it's going to stay there forever? No, right? It's a tent. It's meant to be packed up and carried along. Why? Because they don't have a land, right? There's no way for them to lay hold of a certain land. And don't you think that let's just picture this. They've come out of Egypt. Certainly somebody lives there, right? Somebody lives in the area or owns the land in some way. They find out millions of Israelites are on their land. They say, hey, you got to go. This is our land. And so what do? You pack it up and go, right? God knew that they were going to be moving through people's land, and those people wouldn't want them there largely, right? That's the idea. And how do you move? Think about moving maybe 3 million people at once. It was hard enough today, so we're moving like 20 of them. So moving all these people, it's going to take a lot. But God made it to where the tabernacle was this portable building, of course, where God would meet Moses and all that, and eventually the Aaron and the priest and everything for worship. But look at what's on the outside. What do we see here? Other tents, right? This is where they were living. They don't get nice houses to live in. They came out of nice houses in Egypt, and that's why often they complain. They're like, well, let's just go back to Egypt. We had food and water and shelter, and now we're out here in these tents, right? Do y'all like to camp? You don't? You do? I do. Okay, so I like to camp, but don't you like to come home from camping too? Right, that's kind of part of going, is like it's nice to get away, and then it's real nice to come back. They were doing this for 365 days a year for 40 years. They were camping out in the wilderness. Can you imagine how they felt at that moment? I'm not saying it's right to complain, but you can imagine why they kind of complained. God still provided great things for them, so they shouldn't have, but you can imagine as humans, we would be people just like them. They had all the things they needed, but yet they were oppressed in Egypt. They kind of forgot about that part, and that God did the great delivering them, that God's providing manna and water for them anytime they need. And so you think about this. The tabernacle was being portable, but then they had to take their own stuff. That's something I never really thought about, or maybe I just forgot about. But they weren't just taking the tabernacle with them, but they had to take their own tent and their own stuff. Pack it all up, let's go. Imagine, like, the enemies come and it's like, hey, get out of here. Or you can see them coming from a mile away. They got their horses and their crew. It's like, all right, pack it up fast, I don't know how it works, but I imagine that happened at times. And so basically, the point is here, God's people have always, or at times in the past, felt like pilgrims and felt like this world was not our home, right? We sing about that. This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. He says that in the New Testament, as we just read in 1 Peter. So he says God's people in the past felt like this was not their home. Well, same thing in the New Testament. It's okay to feel like you're out of place, and if that's the reason why you feel out of place. Make sense? Okay, so the second point that I want to make tonight is in the time in which maybe you felt alone, how do I want to ask it? Were there other people around? So yes for you. So there's other people, right? And so, there's, if you go to New York City one day, which there's some reasons to and many reasons not to, but anyways, I've been once. And it's cool to experience, but there's a lot of people and a lot of people walking the streets because it's, even crazier to try to drive. But they basically call, I can't remember exactly what they say about the city, but it's like there's so many people and yet you can feel so alone because the people are just passing you by, you're not really talking to each other. And so just because people are there doesn't mean you're, feeling at home or feeling welcome. So I'm going to give you an example of this that I think is just something that is a good lesson for us as God's people, something that we need to do. And so when I was in high school, so this is like maybe 20 years ago. I'm trying to think about how old I am. A little bit less than 20 years. But I went to big high school. I know you're not in public school. You are. My high school is probably, what is Canadian in terms of like is it 1A, 2A, something in there? Do you know? Yeah, like do you know that? It's like, it tells you kind of like how big the school is. It's a classification, a category of the school. I think Wheeler is like 1 or 2A. And so anyways, just think about that, 1 or 2A, and then the bigger the A's, like it goes all the way to 6, the bigger the school. So my school today would be 6A. Like that's how big, and that's the biggest it gets. Like there's 1,000 people in class, like in terms of your freshman class or your senior class or whatever, there's 1,000 people, or give or take. I mean, I graduated with like 700 or something, which again sounds like a lot, and it is. But I want you to think about that. So we had so many people that our cafeteria was bigger than that building and this building combined, like our cafeteria alone. But it still didn't fit all the people. So how did we eat lunch? Well, yeah, I think maybe some did, but in the middle period of like school of that day, we would have an extra 30 minutes of class for lunch. Well, you had A lunch, B lunch, C lunch, and D lunch. So you might have lunch first thing right after the class before that, or you might have 30 minutes of class and then go to lunch for 30 minutes and then come back for an hour of class, or something along those lines. Or if you had C lunch, it was an hour of class, lunch, and then 30 minutes, that kind of thing. Or again, if you had D lunch, you got an hour and a half of class, and then you go to lunch, you go to the next class. So that's the idea. That's how you fit that many people into one cafeteria when you can't fit them all. So with all that being said, I'm just telling you that there's a lot of people. And I had friends. I played soccer. I did a number of other things, and I was shy at the same time. Like I knew people. People knew me. I could at least sit with them. But there were times where I went to lunch, because lunches changed, as you had different classes in different years, to where I would be alone at the lunch table. And, you think like, well, how is that even possible, right? There's that many kids. I'm telling you, it happens. And it may have happened to you or may not be that way one day. And so, even in college, college was less, it was more of like, hey, I need to like study. And so being alone was kind of a good thing in that moment. But you think about people like that. And if you've ever felt that, what we should be doing as God's people is we should be the people to go and look out for those who are alone, those who are by themselves, and say, look, I know how that feels. If you do, then I don't want you to feel that way, right? And so they made an impact on me that I'm telling you about today. There were kids that, I didn't really know too well, but they came over and said, hey, come sit with us. And I really appreciated that, right? Like, it made me feel good that I could at least be part of the group, even if, after that it was really just me eating and them talking, and I got to know them a little bit, but I was just more quiet, and then, of course, lunches changed. But I say all that to just hopefully help you that sometimes, it's going to feel okay. It's okay. If you feel like you're a stranger in this world because the world is wicked and you're trying not to act that way, then that's a good thing. That's a good way to feel. And don't worry, like you're looking for a better place, right? As they were looking for the promised land, they were headed to a better place in which you won't ever feel that way again. And so I think that's a good and helpful thing. But it's also, as God's people, and especially any human who's felt like hey, I feel alone and that doesn't feel good. Well, we should be the people looking for others. And maybe it's not the case like, hey, you come to their table and you're like, hey, come sit with us. And they're like, okay, but they don't. Then you maybe go back to them and like, look, we're going to bring our table to you if you're okay with that. Don't force it or whatever, but, figure out a way to include people however it might work. And so that's the main lesson for today. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? I'm telling you that not so you can have pity on me, but so you can just know that there will be times in your life that might happen again, and be prepared for those. Or maybe you are somebody who sits alone, and you see somebody else who's sitting alone. You're like, hey, all right, let's team up here. Let's help each other out at this point. I'm not sure if I did that. I think I did a couple times, but it's been a while, so I don't really remember. But all right, that's the main lesson for tonight. It's just a quick little deal there. So pilgrims, part oikos, or sojourner was part oikos, and then the other one, what was the other one? Par epidemos was pilgrims, so that's it. But